Well, we've got the Ford GT40s then coming out for their 80-minute race. And the rules for this as regards pit stops is that they have to make one stop between the 30th and the 50th minute. And as with most of the MRL races, it's a 60 seconds minimum stationary period. Now, it'll be a rolling start for the race, and after qualifying this morning, the grid's going to line up like this. On pole position, we're back with pole on the right-hand side of the track. We've got the number 37 car, which will be shared by Miles Griffiths with multiple British touring car champion Gordon Shedden. Miles will start in the car. The qualifying time was a 2 minutes 40.340, and with them on the front row of the grid will be the number 23 car of James Cottingham and Oliver Bryant, and James Cottingham will be the start driver for that. So 37 and 23 the front row. The second row will have number 15 Michael Birch with Andy Newell, and Andy Newell will start in that car. Best qualifying lap of 2 minutes 43.848. And also on row 2, number 72 is the Richard Cook David Cuff car, which Richard Cook will start with a qualifying best of 249.270. They're of academic interest only really because these tyres were set on a very wet track this morning. So 15 and 72 is row 2. The car's now making their way down the pit lane. They've been put into grid formation in the assembly area, so now they can simply follow the pace car around on one lap, and then that'll peel off at the end of the at the end of the parade lap, and the race will get underway. Row 3, number 7. That's going to be driven first by Xavier Sanster Acedo, sharing with Mike Thorne. And its best time done by Mike Thorne in qualifying was 2:49.349, number 7. And alongside number 177, the Brazilian driver, Bernardo Hartogs, with the best lap of 3 minutes 1.883, but without a co-driver, so he'll be going alone. 7 and 177, row 3. And the last car on the grid, number 3, the Marmouz, Tarek and Galal Mahmoud, and it'll be Galal who goes first in car number 3 with a qualifying best of 3 minutes 5.150. So looking at those qualifying times, there's quite a spread, and there's some prospect, I think, that the race is going to be a bit spread out as well. But let's hope there is a bit of competition somewhere. Marcus, what do you think?
Exactly. Well, this is down at Brooklands. It should be quite interesting. There's one or two, I think, scores to settle up front, shall we say, with I'm quicker than you in GT40. No, I'm not. I think I'm the quicker. But I've got Harvey Stanley alongside me from DK Engineering. Harvey, perhaps you'd like to give a few thoughts on this. You've driven these cars, and of course you're working with DK, sponsors of the event and the meeting.
Yes, thank you, Marcus. Yeah, interesting to note that Ollie Bryant and James Cottingham won the Spa 6 Hours in Ollie Bryant's GT40 just a few weeks ago. And in 2019, the previous Spa 6 Hours, well, that was won by Gordon Shedden and Miles Griffith in the other car on the front row. So these two, I think, will be hammer and tongs for 80 minutes. And then there'll be some serious battles behind, I think, as well.
So a bit like current Le Mans, where it's a sprint race from beginning to end.
Yeah, it's nice that this is 80 minutes, not 60 minutes or 50 minutes like some of the other races. But I don't think we'll see any slower a pace, even though a slightly longer race.
The change to the eased version of Club Corner, beneficial to a GT40 because the gearbox is always the weakest link.
Absolutely. Whenever you go to Spa, everybody talks about GT40 gearboxes letting them down, and it's true. I would say the two weak points of a GT40 are brakes and gearbox, and of course put them together and you're overworking the gearbox. So that faster historic section there, I think, will be very greatly appreciated by the drivers today.
Brilliant, that's Harvey. Bring Harvey back in a moment. Ian, over to you for the start.
Right, the lights out on the safety car, so obviously all's satisfactory to take the start. Great sight it makes, these superb looking cars, the GT40. Created in the early part of the 1960s, 1964 when they first took to the racetrack. And here they come then through Vale and now into Club. If Harvey's prediction is right, then we're going to see a good battle for the lead in the early stages, as we've had in some of the other races earlier today. Can they do better than the E-Types did? So they come out of Club Corner onto what looks a pretty dry, but not yet totally dry, Hamilton Straight. And away we go. And who's going to get into Abbey first? It's going to be from the inside, just having the advantage there. Miles Griffiths, but coming back at him is James Cottingham. This is meant to be an 80-minute race, not a 2-lap sprint. Coming down into the a spin by Andy Newell. So number 15 having a spin. We may get a replay of that. There he gets going again. Number 7 is Sansa Acedo going through the loop, and Adrian onto Wellington Straight come the leaders. They're side by side again as they come down into Brooklands. But it's Miles Griffiths from James Cottingham. It's tremendous side by side stuff, this, or one closely behind the other. James Cottingham only just having to settle for second at this very early stage. Out of Woodcote onto the Heritage Pit Straight. Well, Andy Newell playing catch-up, we're going to be worth keeping an eye on as well. So the two leaders then into Maggots. Is Miles Griffiths beginning to assert himself and open up a bit of a gap? Or will we see them getting level again with each other? Well, coming out of... coming on to Hanger Straight. They're certainly getting away from the opposition, but it's these two locked in combat coming down into Stowe Corner for the second time. But the first racing time. Into Vale, Marcus.
Yeah, terrific, isn't it? Like, such poise through the approach to Club Corner. Here they are,
that's nice.
over where the saloon cars dropped that oil and was spun off. You can see where it's been addressed by the marshals, and it is Miles Griffiths from James Cottingham out front. These two well clear of Richard Cook in third place. Richard Cook, a recent winner at Estoril with Harvey Stanley, who's sitting to my left in the Cobra. That was a fantastic battle with their DK Engineering teammates, James Cottingham and Max Girardo on that occasion. But the GT40s always look beautiful. They're absolutely timeless, aren't they? You wouldn't imagine these cars, the design was done in the early 60s.
Well, the Ford GT, of course, was copied from those only about, 15 years ago, 10 years ago? Was an updated version of these.
And there's quite a deputation from one of the GT40 replica groups here today. I saw 7 or 8 cars there.
Well, a deputation normally has to come make a protest. They were here representing.
Well, they should have joined the grid. It'd be really good. Just for the photographs.
Yeah. See, it's got the Colin Crab blister on the roof to accommodate a tall driver.
Exactly. Terry Drury had similar when I remember in
he wasn't that tall.
His car had a bulge on the roof. I remember it Silverstone 67.
When Terry Sanger drove it, it probably needed to be widened. Harvey,
that bulge on the Cottingham car is for its co-owner Andrew Smith, who, a little taller than James Cottingham, needs that to get his head closed, to get the door closed with his head in. Same thing there on the Richard Cook car, the Gurney bubble.
Yes, Dan Gurney, of course, needed it as well.
So James Cottingham on the first lap there, I saw at Brooklands, it must still be a little bit wet there as he went offline, and that's what allowed Miles Griffith to get back in front, where he remains, as we see.
That's Richard Cook then on the screen. you can see at the moment in the number 72 car. The lead that Miles Griffiths had at the end of the first lap, just under a second, 0.809 of a second.
Well, I remember driving, coming out here and watching Eric Liddell in a
yes.
GT40 back in the 60s.
Whose son Robin still races in the USA.
Absolutely.
In fact, he was he fourth or third the recent weekend in the Pirelli series?
.177 there. That's Bernardo Hartogs, who we saw earlier on in his Lotus, which enjoys Woodcote and Sterling Moss races in. Newell's up a place into 6th at the expense of Sanz de Soto.
Right, 2 laps completed. Miles Griffiths' lead gone up a little bit, not much, 1.146 seconds at the end of the second lap. And I would say that James Collingham is getting ever closer.
Yeah, you can see he was really pushing there into Copse Corner, and those lights on.
Yes.
Just in case Miles Griffiths has forgotten from the cockpit of Philip Walker's car.
Swinging the car through
So he's there.
Beckett's. I thought he was edging closer, but in fact the gaps seem now, as they go down Hanger Straight into Stowe, have gone up a little bit.
I have to check on the stats to see what they're pulling in a straight line down the Hanger Straight, but the thought happy side of 150 with full tanks. Cottingham ran a little bit wide on the exit of Club. There's that's 15, and in fact that's Michael Birch driving that, isn't it? Not Newell, as we were told was going to drive it originally, and that's a replica of the Ford France car that Guy Ligier drove at Le Mans, and Michael has the real one, but races this one, which is a clone of it.
Well, if you think back to the start of the race, that car spun.
Yep.
And we were blaming Andy Newell because we were told he was the start driver, but apologies to Andy. But we can only go on what we're told, I'm afraid.
So, yeah, Michael had that disappointment earlier on of seeing his Lotus 15 grind to a halt on the last lap while leading the Sterling Moss Trophy and Woodcote Trophy race.
You've had no news about why?
There's a suspicion it might have been an engine issue. Whether that was the engine started because it was out of fuel or not, it's not a matter. Right. Believe the Gary Pearson Lister was a transmission issue, diff or drive shaft. So still nothing between these two out front, and they're lapping a chunk quicker than anybody else in the field.
Yes, the third place car definitely is Richard Cook, isn't it? Not David Cuff. Are we agreed on that? Yes. But he is now dropped to 22 seconds adrift of the two leaders. Have you ever got your hands on a GT40, Marcus, to drive in anger on the racetrack?
Not in anger. I've driven a couple, and I drove Martin Colville's ex-golf car.
Yeah.
It was third at Spa, wasn't it, with David Hobbs
And Paul Hawkins.
Yeah. Is it 1084?
I'll have to look that up in the
1048 or
book.
1084. It was one of those two numbers. It rings a bell in my mind. It was a long time ago, 30 years ago, I would think, here at Silverstone.
This is my coffee.
Rare as hen's teeth, except in the commentary box.
Well, these books, they are
Ronnie Spain
quite
GT40
yes.
book. But there's just something so special about the lines of the GT40, and I've seen those photographs of them, Roy Salvadori testing one at Goodwood back in the day. Didn't do a lot of running there, but did some.
Did he win or come second in the last Goodwood, almost his last ever race? Was in a GT40 at Goodwood, I think, the Whitson Trophy.
Quite probably.
In 1964.
Yeah, you can find out in your Ronnie Spain book. Or I will. And David Hobbs had a race there and loaded T70 Spider, didn't he?
He doesn't get a mention because he's not. He should be shown as a. Because John Wyer had a high regard for Roy Salvadori, didn't he? And used him as a test driver long after he retired from competition.
They're working their way through that wonderful flick-flack at Beckett's, the leaders. There's 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds or so between them at this point. There is the Richard Cook and David Cuff car. Third place this weekend. We've got Dario Franchitti racing tomorrow in the Royal Automobile Club Pall Mall Cup race, and also his Formula Vauxhall Junior runner-up, which was David Cuff, who will take this car over later in the race.
That's the Ford France car.
Yep. You've done much in GT40s, Harvey?
Well, yes, the car on screen now, that Richard Cook David Cuff car, I drove with that fairing at Spa for the 6 hours about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I found myself on the podium at Donington in the Amon Cup in the spring of this year. Richard wasn't able to drive the car on that occasion, so I shared with David. But as the rightful owner, it's nice to see Richard back in his car, which is running Pursuit Colours, the name of the team that are preparing that car, Pursuit. And nice to see the top 4 GT40s all prepared by different teams. So ADP prepare that Cottingham and Bryant car. High Tech preparing the Miles Griffith Shedden car, which belongs to Philip Walker. And Jelsko, Andy Newell's own business there, running that car as well.
So you started at the top by getting on the podium then. Was that your first run, the GT40, competitive run?
I raced this, again the car's still on screen, at the Silverstone Classics around here about 2 years ago. But leading into why the Amon Cup exists, as an owner or a racer of a GT40, there aren't that many things you can do with your car. So the Spa 6 hours is always the big one that everybody wants to do. And of course there is a race at Goodwood for genuine GT40s, but saving that, there was very little for people to do with GT40s. So our idea with Legends was to come up with this race, the Amon Cup, just for GT40s, so that all these guys that have cars that are doing 1 or 2 races a year can get out a little bit more in the cars. And I think it's clear from the opinion in the commentary box with me that there's nothing quite like seeing GT40s in anger on race circuits. So I do hope that in time and certainly next season that this series will grow. Perhaps we'll have 3 races a year, and I think we will have stronger grids once the travel restrictions that are sort of lifted are fully lifted, and people can start planning a year's racing again.
Yeah, the timing is always crucial, isn't it? And last year with the COVID situation and everything else, when we came to this meeting, this MRL meeting put together at the end of the season on a one-day basis, there was a real appetite to go racing again. And I don't think anyone necessarily foresaw the dramas that would follow with the travel, etc. this year. But Ian, there's some action on track as Michael Birch goes past, takes a place.
Yeah, it goes ahead of 177 Bernardo Hartogs.
Yeah, Barry Birch with the Rubens Barrichello crash helmet. after that first corner drama.
Yes, making up a lot of time. Yeah.
He's up into to fourth place now.
Was there much debate about calling it the Amon Cup, or was that an obvious name to give it?
I think Amon Cup is absolutely the right name for it.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of discussion, but Chris Amon was such a great guy, so well known with GT40s, and his son's still around, and his son was very keen to come to both races, and very keen that he come and present the trophy himself. So
he's here now.
I actually have to check with Duncan, but he was at Donington and he presented the trophy at Donington, and he was very keen to come today and do the same. So, well, we'll find out at prize giving. Chris
Amon was a great enthusiast of historic racing in his later days, and I remember seeing him at Pukekohe in New Zealand. I didn't see him at. He was sadly gone by the time we were at Taupo.
Well, of course, he started in historic racing almost with a 250F Maserati, didn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
When they'd become slightly obsolete.
Quite remarkable. And to see what his career spanned.
Yes.
It was a wonderful era, wasn't it?
Yeah.
In terms of the type of machinery that an up-and-coming driver could play with. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, how's our lead battle going? It's 2.5 seconds the gap now.
It's kind of where it's been for the last few laps.
Yeah.
In fact, if anything, James Cottingham has snuck a little bit closer, but there's a car between them now, and it stays out of the way at Club Corner. The livery on the Cottingham car, Harvey, is a period livery, isn't it? Because the car kind of has its roots in one that was raced in the States.
That's right. The car's 1029. So 1029 did Sebring in 1965 or 66. Forgive me, I don't know which. And then it went to Le Mans, of course, to do the 24 hours. And in practice, it had a significant accident with another GT40.
And we've got a chance to hear from the pits. Lewis.
Thank you very much, Marcus. Yeah, I'm just chatting down here to Gordon Shedden, who's co-driving Miles Griffiths' car. You're right in the lead at the moment, Gordon.
Yeah, that's Miles' job for sure. So, we've sent him out to try and, set the pace to start with, and he's doing a cracking job so far. So long may it continue.
Yeah, did you set pole lap?
Ultimately, pole was my lap this morning, but I think the track conditions definitely improved a little bit. But we seem to have pretty decent pace in all conditions. Obviously, a little bit of a voyage into the unknown now because the track's dried out, and everything this morning was very, very wet and very slippery.
Yeah, everyone's saying it was very slippery. Is that is that normal for the GP track?
I think so, and I think just the amount of water that fell overnight and just the cold temperature that we've got means that we're really struggling to turn the tyre on to make it work. So everybody's in the same boat, slipping and sliding everywhere, and certainly hanging on in that GT40 this morning.
Well, yeah, we've just been watching the live streaming at DK Engineering, and Miles is drifting the car a bit himself. I'd say Miles is drifting the car through the corners.
Yeah, he's just got a lovely style, Miles. Obviously he drives a lot of historic cars, as well as preparing this GT40 as well. So, I've shared with Miles in the Spa 6 Hours, at Goodwood, at a variety of events. So we know each other very well. We can drive it in a similar way, and it definitely makes life a lot easier for these two driver races.
You've had a bit of success at the Spa 6 Hours, I believe.
Yeah, we won Spa 6 Hours in 2019. I think we were third in 2018, so we're on the right trajectory with it. And it's just great. It's fantastic to get in these old cars, to drive them, to experience what so many guys had to race with back in the 60s. It was it really kind of puts everything back in perspective. And they're fantastic things to drive, and the owners obviously want them shown and raced as well in this environment. It's great.
Yeah, it's absolutely fabulous. Anyway, we got you here. How did the touring car season go for yourself?
Typical touring car season, a little bit up, down, and everything else that goes with it. But the positives were that we finished on a high. We had a couple of wins at Donington, a couple of podiums at Brands to finish off. So that last 20% of the championship was fantastic. We just got beaten up a little bit in the middle. So at least we finished on the front foot, and hopefully we can start there next year.
Yeah, well, that'd be the great thing. It's really competitive this year, isn't it? Well, it has been the last couple of years. Well, that's why you haven't been there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just as Put it in perspective. At Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit, I think if you were half a second off pole, you were outside the top 12 in qualifying on the Grand Prix circuit at Brands Hatch. I mean, it just puts it in perspective as to how close it is and how competitive the championship is just now.
Well, thanks very much for your time. And what time are you? Give us a sneak preview. What time are you coming in for your pit stop?
Well, when Miles gets bored, I guess.
Okay. Oh, thanks very much. Thank you very much. So there's Gordon Shedden.
Good to hear from Gordon then. And of course, what he didn't mention is he's also, and has been for a number of years now, director of the British Racing Drivers Club. So he's involved in the management of Silverstone, amongst other responsibilities, as well as being the PR person, the marketing manager for Knockhill in Scotland. Well, now I think, Marcus, this is coming down a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah, it's getting closer. 2.1 there. It was 2.9 at one point, 2.5. It's looking good. So they're a long way clear, kind of 3/4 minutes or so clear of Richard Cook currently, and the Michael Birch car as well.
One of the great things about watching them is the way they move on the track. Watching a modern car, they're dull. They're much quicker, yeah. But these are exciting cars to watch.
They are, and they're so beautiful to behold, aren't they? I think it's there's something very, very special. And if you saw one of these in 50 years' time, you'd still think what a stunning thing it is in comparison to a lot of the modern supercars, which are a bit bitty and there's things added on to them. These are very pure, very kind of organic kind of shape, aren't they? And you can see where everything happens. You can see the ducting into the front. You can see the ducting on top of the nose, in the side of the engine bay on the top, and it all looks like it's there for a purpose. It's beautifully styled, and it's just an all-time classic.
Yeah, I've just. Have you seen this new book about Ken Miles that's come out?
I haven't.
By Dave Friedman. Harvey, have you seen it? It's a massive photograph. It's more of a photograph album actually than the story of Ken Miles, and the photographs in there, the image are just superb.
Well, I'm sure we've all been to see the film. I mean, the
Le Mans 66,
film, which was a cracking film in its way.
Yes.
I think if you weren't an absolute out-and-out ardent race fan, you got plenty from it. I think we could all pick holes in it, but that's the nature of the beast. We come to racing all the time. But people who are not dyed-in-the-wool racing enthusiasts enjoyed it as a couple of hours escapism.
And it did a lot about, because Ken Miles had really been a forgotten British driver. He'd gone out to America years ago and played a major role in the development of the GT40.
Very much so.
As well as the Cobra before. Something of an unsung hero. One of the reasons I always liked, he always used to wear his BRDC badge in America when he went out to race in America, whether it was MGs or Porsches or whatever it was. He had his BRDC badge on.
Confer special privileges in restaurants in the
I wouldn't know about that, but no, it's a good film. No feature film is going to stick strictly to the facts, the 100% accuracy.
Never let the truth get in the way of a good story, as they say.
Well, that's, yeah.
You can just twist it and a few nuances, etc.
Nuances, that's right.
Keep the basis there, because you will get found out. So that was Michael Birch, and just going through. Leaders put a lap on the Ford France car.
Actually, because of the sound they make as well, you can look at these cars. Even though there's not a huge amount of, I know these two are racing for the lead, but other than that, there's not too much going on behind. But they're just such great cars to watch and listen to.
They're incredible.
At high speed.
Yeah. And those two, the double barrel shotgun exhaust pipes are fabulous, aren't they? Just, If ever you were to have a collection of model race cars or something like that, then GT40s would do it. They're available in so many liveries, so many really iconic period liveries, just superb. And the Ford France livery, which we saw on Cobras before, and really tell a great story in racing. And
in the days before, they're very off at attention now. In the days before speed limits infested the country, and the continent. Willie Green with John Davenport as co-driver, or reading the maps, did some ludicrous speed from Calais, I think it was, to Monaco. And if you get Willie talking about that, if you can still remember it, it was quite some drive.
The Ford France car was a Guy Ligier car, wasn't it? And Guy Ligier was an ex-rugby international, wasn't
That's right,
he? Who
yes.
I saw here in the '67 British Grand Prix, and when Jim Clark won, and he was a privateer Formula One racer.
Yeah,
made his money in construction, didn't
that's
he?
right.
Yeah.
And getting on with politicians.
Yes.
That didn't do him any harm. Was it not his car that appeared in that French film, Un homme et une femme?
Never seen it.
Well, oh, you've never seen it? Oh, right. Well, with starring Jean-Louis Trintignant, the nephew of Maurice Trintignant, and Anouk Aimée, who was rather delicious. And so they did quite a lot of the filming at Montlhéry.
Mm-hmm.
The basic plot was about Jean-Louis Trintignant driving from one end of Europe to the other in a Ford Mustang, the Shelby GT40s Mustang, to meet his heartthrob. And a GT40 certainly featured in that. It probably was the Ford France car.
That would make sense.
Because they also had their Formula 2 Brabham on display.
Yes, little 1 litre Brabham.
Yes,
they had.
that's right, yeah.
So we continue, and the lead battle is still very strong. There are only a second between them. Cottingham was fractionally closer to Griffiths a while back. I wonder whether they will stop on the same lap, or whether there'll be some tactics coming.
Well, I'll ask the man on your left.
Harvey, you may have some insight. What would
Yes.
you be doing if you were in the team manager's perch?
Yeah, normally on a race like this, I would try and leave the pit stop as late as possible so that you can capitalise on a safety car. Of course, the safety car comes out and there's a net gain if you stop under the safety car, but because this is a big circuit and not the busiest of grids, I think the chance of a safety car is quite slim. So I think that option probably isn't there. I think there is a bit of driver fatigue. 80 minutes isn't all that long, and of course we know these cars will go longer, but they are physical to drive and they do get very hot. So, especially in the case of the front two cars where you've got two very even driver pairings, I would have thought to see these cars stopping around about the middle mark.
Yeah, that's interesting, and Bernardo Hartogs is in to do the whole thing on his own, but as a Brazilian he can probably cope with the heat in the cockpit.
Yes, quite. Although, was it Brazil where Nelson Piquet collapsed on the podium after a very hot Grand Prix, I think? Yeah. Well, these two have got themselves into a little battle as well, haven't they?
They've just repassed there, and that was Hartogs went past Birch at Copse Corner, I think.
This is for fourth place. So, in third place, Richard Cook's got nobody to play with, really,
and the leaders are sort of hove into view behind. They'll be putting a lap on this pair in just a second. We're down to 52 minutes to go. And look at that. Well, that's a great sight, isn't it?
It is. Particularly a car with its lights on. Looking very Le Mans.
All the cars racing. There's the GT40 corral behind.
Right. Deputation, you called it earlier.
Oh, it's
So once again, I see the leaders here in a class of their own. There's been a second between them now for the last 2 or 3 laps. Griffith has the faster lap of the race so far, but by less than a tenth. So when you get to a point where you've got just a second or two between two cars, coming through back markers can make a huge difference. And it looks like here that Miles Griffiths has got through that fighting pack a little better than Cottingham, and that could have cost James sort of 1 or 2 seconds in his battle to keep up with Griffiths there.
Yeah, we just saw Hartogs was between them as they came to Brooklands, and the leader Griffiths was able to dive in and get the apex, and that's actually allowed him to get a little bit more exit speed while James was sorting out his way past the fourth place man. That car was also driven by James Hansen, wasn't it, at Spa? But James really struggled with the heat towards the end. Just couldn't drive it any longer, apparently. That's what I was told this morning by Michael Birch.
Yeah, when you come up against back markers like the leaders did just there, so often it goes, in this instance, it's the first guy through the back markers has got on better, but so often it's the other way around, where the leading car approaches the back markers and the back markers suddenly wake up, they see the leading car and they let him through, and then let the second place car through that much easier. But it's not worked out that way this time. But it seems like James has got a bit more pace here, because he's managed to close the gap back up almost immediately.
Yeah, the other thing with the overtaking like that is that the leader has to find his way past guys who perhaps aren't that used to racing these cars, and is probably a little bit more cautious, not knowing maybe who's in those cars at the time, and it sometimes can give the chaser that little opportunity to read the situation that much better and kind of not second guess, but just make the best out of it.
Well, of course, as the leader, the onus is on you. So I've had races. I had a particular race at Goodwood about a year ago where I was in second, and we were coming up against a pack, and of course it's the leader. The leader has to make the onus of when you make that move. If you're following, it is that much easier. Following is a lot easier than being followed. When you've got somebody behind you, and James knows what he's doing, he's got the lights on for added effect. When you've got somebody behind you, and every time you check your mirrors, there they are. The next corner, there they are. The pressure does start to build. Miles Griffiths is pretty experienced himself, so I'm sure a flick on of the lights won't unsettle him too much. But it all starts to build up. When you have a long race like this and a consistent pressure from the guy chasing you, it only takes one mistake or one mistake through traffic, and that can really change the course of a race.
Yeah, it's pretty small margins between these guys. I mean, they're very, very evenly matched out front, aren't they? As we've seen by the times. I mean, it's only a second between them. They've been racing now for around half an hour or so, and it's still everything to play for with 48 minutes of the 80. Another car to be lapped now.
Well, that's going to be Richard Cook, isn't it?
I think that's is that the Sans Diaceto car?
It's being lapped for the second time then.
Oh, and that was just a touch over the curb that time coming out of Chapel, but yes, there we go. We're safely passed on the run down to Stowe Corner, and suddenly that gap is back to next to nothing.
The other thing, of course, a battle like this does is it starts to add pressure on the pit crew. As we can see, it's proving quite a lot of hard work for Cottingham to try and get back a second or even half a second. Of course, that means that the pit crew can't afford to let that car stand stationary for any more than 60 seconds. Whilst 2 seconds doesn't sound like a lot, it could be. Now we've got some flashing here, so perhaps that's a signal that Miles Griffith wants to come in. I'm not sure if the window's open.
It isn't open.
Yeah. Griffiths' car appeared to understeer a chunk through there, through Abbey, and he's suddenly lost all that ground, and Cottingham's on the attack in the 23.
Pit window is open.
Well, I think highly likely we're going to see Griffiths come in there in the middle of the circuit and flashing lights. I think those guys probably accept that Shedden is the faster driver. He was a couple of seconds quicker in qualifying, so I suspect they are responding to the Cottingham-Bryant threat here, and I suspect we'll see him come in. If that is the case, I think we'll see Cottingham stay out. I don't think James will consider Ollie Bryant to be any faster than him, although certainly not any slower. So I think we might see one of the leaders in the pits.
Yeah, this is really building up to a fascinating.
Rather nicely, yeah.
Yeah, a fascinating second phase, isn't it? Because we're pretty close to that stop for these lead cars.
Yeah, the car we saw in the pits, 15. It was a changeover from Michael Birch to Andy Newell.
Yeah, that's right. And that car's going to come alive in the second part. The car is a Gelsco car made by Andy Newell's company.
Only 2 weeks ago, Andy was winning the Gars Trophy here, the HSCC, with his Chevron.
Here we go.
Again, I suspect that team think that driver 2, Andy Newell, will be a faster driver than Michael Birch. And since they were battling with Bernardo Hartogs, I suspect they feel like having the faster driver in the car for the longer stint overall is the quicker strategy, which of course logically does make sense.
be interesting to see whether Andy Newell can will suddenly establish himself within 3 or 4 laps, lapping close to the pace, if not maybe even quicker. It doesn't really matter. I mean, he can really push for it now because they're quite a long way behind. Be interesting to see how it works out. A lovely slide, both of them in unison, but a bit more twitch from James Cottingham, the chaser, and as they come up into Abbey.
Yeah, Andy Newell's a lap behind, so even without the pit stop.
Yeah.
Which he's now
It
had.
all gets very, very close at Village.
So we didn't see the Griffith Shedden cart come in there, so I think to explain what the flashing might be, a GT40 runs twin fuel tanks, one in each sill, and generally speaking they're on separate pumps. So at some point in the race you have to switch from your left pump to your right pump, or your right to your left. And it's pretty commonplace to flash the pit lane there to let them know you've done that change. That then allows them to calculate roughly what sort of rate of fuel you're using. And of course, this isn't a refueling race, but it will give the team some comfort that they've fueled it correctly. With 44 minutes to go, he's obviously switched from one tank to the other.
Does it affect the balance of the car as you switch from one to the other? You suddenly got one more or less dry tank, and the other one. Would you, for sake of argument, choose one tank for the start and always, according to the orientation of the track?
No, I don't think there's any difference there's any noticeable difference in balance when you have one tank empty and one tank full. But if we look at the time here, 44 minutes, we're about half distance. Clearly, what that shows us is that the team running the silver and yellow car there have obviously started the car with equal fuel in each tank, so they must feel there's a difference. Of course, the weight is low down on each side, so I guess they feel having the tanks equally filled for the start is the way to do it. Now, whatever has happened, Cossingham's got the bit between his teeth, and the pressure's even greater than it was before.
Oh, I hope we can cut back to that at the moment, because I totally agree, Harvey. He's getting closer and closer, and he could make a move to take the lead back very soon.
There we are.
Well, that's solved the problem.
Yeah, so Miles Griffith then in the 37 has been the leader, and he is the first of that pair into the pits. And that's on 16 laps.
So all race long, the leaders have been doing very consistent 17s with the occasional 2 minute 16. Clearly, Shedden flashed theirs, jumping in the car. Let's see what lap time he can do. There's no reason why that car shouldn't be straight on the pace from his first flying lap.
Yeah, he's a pro, jumps in and out of all these things, isn't it? It's interesting, actually, that handling thing. That car did seem to understeer a bit more coming through Abbey.
Yeah, just noting there with a 60-second stop, there's no time at all to even think about changing tyres. 80 minutes on a Dunlop on a GT40 is getting on a little bit. So I think probably towards the end of the race we will start to see, particularly if we look at some of these driving styles, I think we will start to see some tyres starting to go. And I think the other thing that we might see after 80 minutes is potentially a little bit of brake fade. As we said earlier, GT40s are a little bit notorious for that. Modern brake pads, especially endless pads, for example, are much better. But let's see at the end of the race if we see any deterioration in car. Richard Cook is in to hand over to David Cuff.
What about the fuel consumption of these 4.7 litre V8s? What sort of MPG would they be running typically?
Well, it's interesting. A GT40 and a Cobra have the same engine, but when you drive a Cobra and you drive a GT40, you almost don't believe it. A GT40 feels that much faster. I think part of that is weight. A GT40 is probably a little lighter. Part of that is a GT40 has a 5-speed box, whereas the Cobra has a 4-speed box, so your ratios are slightly shorter. But I think most of it is aerodynamics. So I think a Cobra uses more fuel than a GT40 because it's trying to push that sort of upright front screen and very unaerodynamic shape through the air, and the GT40 is that wonderful, beautiful, typical racing car wedge shape.
You don't see too many leaf springs on a GT40, do you?
No, I think when you drive a Cobra or an E-Type, and then you transition to a GT40, you suddenly realise, if you've been used to driving Cobras and E-Types, and you jump in the GT40, you realise that the GT40 was designed to be a racing car. It was designed to hit apexes and go around racetracks. And of course, E-Types and Cobras have been made to do that later on. And that does make a GT40 that much more responsive than those other GT cars.
Yeah, it was a racing car that was designed as a racing car that became a road car for certain purposes, whereas the McLaren F1 was the other way around.
But went to Le Mans and surprised everybody.
Yeah, I think you're right, everybody was surprised, but it was a dominant performance.
We're down at the halfway stage now. They've covered 17 laps. Leaders, Cottingham and Ollie Bryant waiting to go there.
Yeah, we're just waiting to see how it'll shake out after they both made their pit stops.
How's the lap times of Andy Newell? Oh yes, already a long way down. That car's getting quicker and quicker.
Yeah, a 2:20.8 as Andy Newell's. That's probably his first lap out of the car, actually.
Yeah, I would think so.
That compares with the fastest lap, which is by Miles Griffiths at 2:16.531, and the best lap for James Cottingham, 2:16.619. So they could hardly be more equal.
Yeah, Andy's another of those very versatile guys. He won an off-road championship at the time when he was racing in Formula Ford and that sort of stuff. He switched to a bowler and did the British off-road championship and won his section in that.
Yeah, I see there that James's last lap is a 2:18, so he certainly wasn't being held up by Miles Griffith. He certainly hasn't got himself in clean air and gone any faster. If anything, he's gone slower. Now, we don't know what happened on that. He's in. So he'll hand over to Ollie Bryant. As I say, the pairing that won the Spa 6 Hours a few weeks ago, albeit in Ollie Bryant's car. Now they're in James Cottingham and Andrew Smith's car.
So being very cognizant of the speed limit in the pit lane. There's Ollie Bryant. They've had a real run in recent times, haven't they? Won the Spa 6 Hours together. James had some great runs at Estoril and at Goodwood. Ollie too at Goodwood.
Well, of course, I'm sure Ollie Bryant, whatever happens today, I'm sure Ollie Bryant will look back at 2021 as the year that he finally won the TT, having been trying with the family Cobra. Well, I've lost count of how many times, but I think between 15 and 20.
Yeah, I mean, his father raced it in the early days with Bill Shepherd. Bill Shepherd's also gunning to win one. He's been very, very close and was again. So yeah, it's been an interesting odyssey for them both. And of course, he and James go back to sort of racing together in the MGBs at the sort of Spa 6 Hours back in like 2003, 2004, something like that. So they know each other of old.
Yeah, they're great buddies and very good friends. But I think they first met at a race meeting, both in MGBs. So yeah, they both learnt their trade in MGBs. I think James was a little envious as he watched Ollie move on to racing that family Cobra just a few years later, and he was still racing MGBs, but I think James has made up for it and had his fair share of racing sexy kit.
Yes, the Delara Judd is something pretty special, isn't it? I mean, no opposition in Portugal, but it makes the best noise on the planet probably for racing cars. Wonderful. Have you driven it?
I've done 3 laps in the car at Donington, which was a bit like GT40s. They look quite intimidating, those prototypes, but then you remember, like a GT40, it was built to do the very thing you're asking it to do. So it really isn't as scary as you think it is. Now, with both leaders back on track, it does look like James Cossingham's taken the lead in that driver change.
Yeah, there's not much between them on track, probably a couple of 100 metres, I would think, something like that. And there in the 37 is Sheds, Gordon Shedden, the Scot. And ahead of him, you can see Ollie Bryant. There they go, Bryant with those stripes over the top of the car, sort of kind of French stripes if you like, and then the silver and yellow machine goes through. Shedden pushing on through. After a couple of laps, we'll see whether there is any alteration to the status quo here. But at the moment, we've got nothing much between them at all. 100 metres, 150 metres, something like that.
Yeah, I watched the driver change there between James and Ollie Bryant there, and having shared with James quite a lot, he's very good at giving feedback to the second driver. So whenever I've shared a car with him, there's always, if there's anything wrong with the car, if there's a long brake pedal, if there's a vibration, he's very, very good at passing that feedback to the second driver. And I saw in this instance there was almost no feedback. So that says to me there are no problems with the car.
Yeah, that's all about that understanding that the drivers build up between themselves, isn't it? And there's that mutual trust. But when you do a longer distance race, I did the 24 hours here one year, so much more comes into it. And as a driver, you feel so much more responsibility for those working on the cars, turning the cars around in the pit stops, etc. If you screw up, it's not just you who pays the price.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people also find that racing a car with somebody, you sort of build an affinity with somebody because you've been through the same experience. Now, Shedden's tightened up the gap there, and if
1.6.
Let's not forget that Ollie Bryant has probably never driven that car on this circuit in the dry. So the extra lap or two that Shedden will have had in that car post driver change probably explains why their respective last laps Shedden went a little bit quicker. But Ollie's driven plenty of GT40s, he's driven plenty of laps around Silverstone, and I'm sure he will be on the pace in no time at all.
Well, he's got the lead, but by probably now less than a second. There's 1.6 seconds difference between the two cars as they cross the line at the end of the previous
not
lap.
Now, Ian. Not now. He's sniffing the exhaust of the leader, isn't he?
I'll just say that's what it was at the start of the lap, but it's come down to virtually nothing. Bit of a wiggle there from Gordon Shedden,
and that's out of Woodcote, which is sort of the sort of place where Ronnie Peterson would give a bit of a wiggle.
Oh no, Ronnie's different, completely different. Sideways through the old Woodcote.
Yeah, and mighty it was too. That's a view and a half, isn't it?
It is.
Gloriously liveried GT40s with their lights ablaze.
I think it's darker on the screen than it is outside,
yeah,
isn't it?
It is.
It's making it look more Le Mans-like. Is Gordon going to go for it into Stowe this time?
He's having a look,
yes,
isn't
no,
he?
yes he is.
Yeah, he's close enough.
Yeah.
He's made it.
And Ollie's not going to argue.
No, but then again, you then follow for a few laps and try and pick him back off.
Yeah, there was no real defending there from Ollie Bryant, so I suspect he's seen the clock, he's seen there's more than 30 minutes left of this race to go, and I suspect he doesn't feel the need to be driving a wide car for half an hour and feels he's probably better off sticking with him, driving the car, looking after the car, making sure that in 25 minutes time when we've got 7 minutes left, he's still got a fast car underneath him.
Yeah, exactly. As we know, these things are not necessarily going to be as good at the end of a race as at the beginning. So if you can conserve what you have, a little bit more grip at the end, a little bit more, you know your reliability is strong, then there's every possibility you can have another go. There's the car now driven by David Cuff, Richard Cook's car, dressed in another eye-catching period livery. So many to choose from. If you went to you went to Glasgow or Super Performance in South Africa, as I did when I was there last year,
yes.
Saw them making the cars, the sensational Le Mans winning replicas you can have, just amazing. And the standard of finish and execution on the car is absolutely marvellous. You can get an FIA spec car down there, and seeing those and the Cobras all being made was something very special.
Can we talk about the possible cost of getting one of those?
If you have to ask the price, you can't afford it, Ian.
I know, I can't afford it.
That's why
I can't afford it. That's why I'm asking the price.
Harvey's the salesman. He'll sell you one.
I can't afford. I've got an E-Type, but I can't afford a GT40.
You can swap it for a Gelsco or Super Performance GT40, no problem at all. You'll be in the elite in the world.
And then the old bones would have to bend double to get into the car. That's
Just think of the fun you'd have doing it. So that's Andy Newell with the JCB badged crash helmet running fourth.
Yeah, his lap time last time around 2:20.6, very consistent. 2:20.5 is best.
So you're a second or so outside the leader, isn't it?
That's what I was going to come to. Yeah, that's right. So Gordon Shedden's last lap at 2:19.1, and Ollie Bryant's 2:19.3. Mike Thorne has just last lap done his best lap in the race in the number 7 car, which he took over, 2:27.118.
Yeah, Mike Thorne's done virtually no mileage in this. I mean, he's a Healy man through and through, isn't he? And he's driven that silver Healy 100 beautifully for many years, and this is a real kind of opportunity for him.
Yeah, Andy Newell here, who's jumped in the car, he's sharing with Michael Birch. It's going very well, doing pretty much the same lap times as the leaders, albeit I think they'll rue that spin on the first lap with 1:16 behind that last place of the podium, which is currently occupied by David Cuff, who was sharing with Richard Cook. I think that'll be far too big a margin for him to reel in, especially as David Cuff is lapping not far behind the leaders either.
Yeah, the last lap by David Cuff was a 2:22.3.
The car being pushed into the pit lane here at Woodcote, so one of them is in trouble. It's the Thorne car, I think. Sans Diocedo and Thorne being pushed into the Heritage pit lane. I saw a Jerry of Marshall's pushing along. I might run out and see what's happened.
Yeah, well, Gordon's just getting away now, isn't he?
Yeah, I think I was expecting that the two would stay a little bit closer than they have done, but Gordon does seem to be checking out here, and Ollie Bright's not even in the same shot anymore. His last lap was, I think, a 2:19 if I'm right, which says to me that the circuit's got a little bit slower, or the cars are just starting to deteriorate a little bit. So perhaps we'll see that come back if there's any more deterioration in car condition.
But from Gordon's point of view, he just wants to enjoy driving a great car around a good circuit, doesn't he?
Yeah,
doesn't want to ease off and cruise, does he?
Looking at Bryant's last lap time of 24, here we are, they are in the pits. I did suspect a problem, which I think we must have here as he's back in the pits for an unscheduled stop. Back's coming open here. ADP Racing, the guys that run that car, they'll be all over that and see what the problem is. Now that might get Michael Birch out of trouble with his spin, because of course that will promote the Cook and Cuff car to second, and the Birch and Newell car, that'll be promoted into third. Not what we wanted to see. James Costigan looking on there in his dark blue jacket.
I can report, having just spoken to Mike Thorne, it's an electrical problem that has stopped the his car, one he shares with Sans Diocedo. So what's the problem here, Harvey, do you think?
Tough to tell. There's no obvious smoke or anything like that. We've got some bottles of oil going in, so possibly they've had an oil pressure warning light come on. That's possible, and they're topping up the oil to rectify that. That's possible, but it certainly robbed us of that race we thought we were going to get for the last half an hour. I'm not sure Shedden's got any idea of slowing down, though, as you can see.
No,
that lovely driving style, every apex curb hit. Still quite busy behind the wheel, which from a neutral's point and a point for good TV, it's quite nice to see somebody quite active behind the wheel like that.
I remember seeing this first GT race, which wasn't a GT40, it was a Ferrari 458 in the British GT Championship. And he took over Hector Lester's car, which was nearly a lap down. And he spent the rest of the race driving it so smoothly. And for a toy car driver, you tend to think they're a bit rough and ready at times. But he was so quick and smooth. And he kept all the front runners behind him. They couldn't overtake him. It wasn't if he got out of the way, they could have done, but he was just enjoying himself.
Pedro Rodriguez.
Yeah.
I love it when current modern professional racing drivers come and drive historic cars. We had Jenson Button driving a Cobra for us at Goodwood, and I was speaking to Karun Shandok on Tuesday about his experience with driving historics. And I don't think I'm yet to hear a modern, current day professional speak anything other than good things about driving historic cars, which, from a selfish point of view, I think is good for our sport.
Well, they also set a very good standard, don't they? Years ago, I remember Andrew Kokodi, when he was a young up-and-coming single-seater driver, driving a Chevron in a GT race, historic GT race, and he just ran away with it. I mean, everybody else was just sort of at their normal pace, but a young professional was in a different level, really.
Yeah, I think the standard, generally speaking, in historic motorsport is on the up and has come up massively. And I think when Jenson turned up at Goodwood, and I asked him if he'd done any testing or if he'd thought about going on the simulator before coming to Goodwood, I think he looked at me like I was mad. But when he finished his first qualifying session midfield, I think he took it all a bit more seriously. But I mean, Jenson was a star that weekend, and he got on the pace very quickly in the Cobra. But I think people seem to think that historic racing is not as competitive as other forms of motorsport, and I think that's not the case. I think every modern driver or every pro that comes through it with that attitude is shocked by quite how competitive it is.
I think that's right, because a lot of the drivers who are running up front are, let's face it, spending a fair amount of money doing it. They get a lot of seat time, a fair amount of testing, and they've got real professional backup in the pits as well. So they've got top engineers.
Right, Lewis, who's with you?
Yeah. So this lot would normally go to that meeting, but they decided to last year.
I thought we were going to have hear from an interview that Lewis was about to have, but perhaps not. So, back to what you were saying, Marcus, sorry.
Yeah, the guys who are doing it really seriously have very serious professional engineers running the cars as well. And the whole expectation, the whole level just moves up and up and up. And they come back year after year and just go faster and faster and faster, which is what it's all about.
Yeah, go on, Harvey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at other forms of pro-am motorsport, things like British GT, I really don't see top-level historic motorsport as any less competitive than a modern-day GT grid.
Yes, have another go, Lewis. Are you there?
Yes, thank you, Ian. Yes, I am there. Yes, I'm down in the pits there with James Gottingham. Sadly, James, Ollie had to bring the car in. What was the problem?
Well, during my stint, I saw the oil pressure light flick on a couple of times as I was going through the historic kink at the end of the lap there, and just thought it was okay. Mentioned it when I got out of the car, but for Ollie it was coming on longer, so he just was being careful and looking after the car, and obviously you don't want that light to come on. That means low pressure, and don't want to blow the engine up.
Well, yeah, that's the sad thing, isn't it? So anyway, you were really battling away there for the victory.
Yeah, I mean, the opening lap was pretty close, and really enjoyed that with Miles. No contact or anything like that, but we had a really good sort of 4 or 5 corners where we were super close to each other, and then I just decided to settle into a bit of a rhythm behind him, although I was really pushing, and we were both doing, I saw on the V-Box, doing 17s the whole time, so pretty consistent pace, and probably sort of 10 or 11 laps in, the brakes started to fade a bit, and I could see that he was struggling to slow the car down as well, so we were both sort of having the same problems perhaps at about the same time. And then I saw him slowing a bit further, and I figured he was cooling his brakes, ready to do his pit stop. And of course he did after 2 laps, so I just did one more lap and then came in. And, obviously Ollie was a bit hotter out the pits than Gordon was, or perhaps Gordon wasn't quite on it when he left the pits because Ollie was ahead. But unfortunately, Gordon got the better of him, and that was us in second. And I don't know where we are now, having done that oil stop. But yeah, what a great race series. So pleased to see the cars out, and hopefully we can get more out if we get the opportunity to have more of the Amon Cup.
Yes, that would be absolutely fabulous. I was watching with Gordon on the screen here at DK Engineering. I've got the live streaming on. You're actually sliding the cars through lots of the corners.
Yeah, it's funny when you're going around. Obviously, you want to be as smooth as possible, but sometimes you're battling understeer and oversteer, and it's better to get the car rotated and use the power to just sort of get a good exit, but not too much wheel spin. I mean, we were talking 440 horsepower in a 1,000-kilogram car with no traction control and historic tyres, so it's a bit of a battle, but it's very, very enjoyable to drive, very satisfying, but hard work. I was pretty hot and tired when I got out after 40 minutes or so.
So what do you think they would have been like to race for 24 hours in period?
Well, I've done quite a lot of endurance races in GT40s as well, and I think you would never have done that sort of pace in period. They would have been a bit gentler, a bit easier, and actually when you back the car off and you do sort of 3 seconds a lap slower, it's actually quite a rewarding, quite an easy car to drive, and you can nurse it around. And Ollie and I won the Spa 6 Hours a few weeks ago, and we had no fourth gear from 20 minutes into the race for the rest of the race, so it meant we were sort of driving the car quite carefully, and it's not as tiring. But when you really try and do that flat out pace for lap after lap, it gets hot and sweaty in there, and it's there's nowhere for the air to go, there's no windows, it's a hot thing, but they're just mega things. And the best thing to do is take one to Le Mans. As soon as you leave the pits and you go up the Mulsanne straight, there is nothing better than that car. I mean, it was what it was designed to do.
Okay, James, thanks very much, and we'll keep our fingers crossed that everything goes well to the end.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Harvey, any thoughts on what James had to say?
Yeah, I suspected it could have been an oil pressure light, as there wasn't anything obvious, and there were bottles of oil in hand. It's one of those tricky things. James owns that car, so it's a little easy for him to look at an oil pressure warning light and decide that he doesn't need to come in. Ollie, in this instance, is the guest, if you like, in his car, so you have to be that little bit more careful and a little bit more cautious on warning lights, and obviously of all the warning lights, that's the one you don't want to see.
Right, well, what chances do they have? They are a lap down, of course, now. The race is going completely the way of the number 37 car, with Gordon Shedden at the wheel. Miles Griffiths having started the race in the car, just coming up to the 1 hour mark.
Well, remarkably, because of James's very punchy start and the way those two gap themselves from third place, and Michael Birch's spin, they seem to have rejoined in third place,
yes.
So they may still get a podium.
Yeah, I mean, Andy Newell is lapping slower than Ollie Bryant is. Their last laps, respectively, Ollie did a 2:18.7 and Andy Newell a 2:20.7.
Well, yeah, they might not be nose to tail, but Shedden and Bryant are doing the same lap time. So, what a shame, because I think we would have had a great battle between those two very even driver pairings.
Okay, so the order then, just to recap what we've been saying, the lead is held by the number 37 car in the hands of Gordon Shedden, which was started by Miles Griffiths, and he's completed 26 laps and is a lap ahead of the number 72 car, which is now in second place after the problems for the number 23 car. So number 72 now in the hands of David Cuff, lapping about 3 seconds a lap. In fact, last time around they're almost exactly 3 seconds difference in their times. In third place is Ollie Bryant in the car that had to make that pit stop, as explained by James Cottingham just now. Number 23 in third place is 34.7 seconds behind David Cuff and lapping quicker. So we could have
we could well see, actually. We could well see the Cottingham Bryant car fighting its way back up to almost its rightful place, a second. I think the pit board should be able to communicate that to Bryant, knowing the guys at Pursuit who are running Cuff in second. They'll have their board out communicating that whilst you thought you were having a lonely race there, you may well have a scrap on your hands. 16 minutes to go, that's possible.
Actually, this race has passed quite... only 16 minutes left. We had 7 starters. It's actually turning out to be an engrossing race, isn't it? Absorbing race.
Well, it's clear to me that the three of us could sit in a commentary box all day and watch GT40s drifting
well, that's
around
also
corners.
true. Well, I'm also thinking, I don't know if there's any mileage in this thought, to have a match race between these and 275 LM Ferraris.
Well, yes, the Amon Cup for GT40s, we sort of worked out between genuine cars, super performance gels cars, that there might be something like 40 or 50 cars out there, of which 20 or 30 are actively racing.
Yeah.
I'd love to tell you there were 20 or 30 actively racing Ferrari LMs out there, but I think there are one or two.
One or two at the most.
I've just had a thought. You could have some Gelsco or super performance Ferraris that actually are GT40s under the skin, but Ferrari bodywork.
That's touring cars. That's what goes on in the BTCC.
So yes, this is one last intriguing twist in this race potentially, isn't it? With Ollie Bryant out there in the 23, trying to chase down David Cuff in the 72 car.
Well, we've had 1 or 2 races quite like that, haven't we, today? If you think about the Richard Bradley coming under pressure of Chris Ward.
Yeah, just looking at the times here, David Cuff's he went out doing 23s. He's now doing, his last lap was a 21. Bryant's was a 2:17. That's 4 seconds quicker.
Yeah.
By my maths, that's about what Bryant needs to be. It needs to be taking 3 or 4 seconds per lap out of him to catch him up on the last lap. And I think, well, looking at the timing screens, that's what's happening.
Yes.
I think Harvey's turning into a pundit here, into the sort of the Bill Frindle of the of the motor racing commentary box. Hasn't quite got his slide rule out, but it's all worrying.
It's Andy Zaltzman these days. Have you come across Andy Zaltzman on his cricket commentaries? He's amazing with his statistics. What does that mean?
Means I'm here.
Everything's good. I'm here. Well, they should know that.
But it may well be a response to the pit board to say that Ollie's closing in. Ollie is faster than you.
I don't think David Cuff's going any quicker, is he? I mean, he's settled into a particular groove, and there doesn't seem the potential to go quicker. So I think Ollie is in with a chance.
Tell us a little bit about the Pursuit team. That's fairly new on the block, isn't it?
Yeah, so Pursuit, as I say, who are running that GT40 today, and they're running a Cobra tomorrow. Yeah, that's a new team. They're based up in Bicester, run by young Ollie Cable, who's cut his teeth with Lanzante and also in modern GTs. And he's decided that there was a gap in the market for a team that can run all sorts of cars, because of course there are a lot of people out there with a variety of historic racing cars and therefore a variety of preparers. He's pretty confident that he can be running a quite wide variety of cars, and to be fair to him, he's had wins this year with the Dallara LMP1 car, the Riley and Scott LMP1 car, won at Le Mans on the Bugatti circuit, and he's had multiple wins with Cobras, both myself and Richard Cook driving Richard's Cobra, James in his Cobra, and as well as running GT40s. I think next year there's some Alans coming and some more sports racing prototypes. So yeah, to be fair to him, he said he could run anything, and it looks like he certainly can.
So with about 12.5 minutes to go, how is this battle looking for second place? Well,
24.9, I think, is it?
Yeah, last time through it was about 5.5 seconds or something, wasn't it? Between that Bryant was quicker than Cuff.
Still is.
Yep, and that is coming down, and we're going to get about 5 more laps out of this.
Before I came up to the commentary box, I bumped into Jonathan Wheatley in the pit lane, and I sort of thought he might like a day off on the basis he's just come from a Grand Prix, and he's got 3 weekends on the trot in his day job running Red Bull Racing. But he told me he's come to watch his good mate David Cuff in the GT40. So if there's one man who'll be watching this intently, it'll be Cuffy's mate Jonathan Wheatley. And if Bryant can get past, I'm sure Jonathan will have a good wind up with him tonight.
They're all from the same neck of the woods, aren't they?
Well, yes, the Bryant family are based in Marlow. Jonathan Wheatley's in Beaconsfield, and David Cuff's Beaconsfield and sort of Hewenden Valley. So, yeah, they're all locals. I know that Wheatley and Cuff go for sort of a curry night once a month. So they are all good mates, and that does mean that if Cuff loses this second place to Bryant, he will be getting a ribbing at the next curry night.
He goes on at the moment. Sorry, go on.
Ian and I both remember Mike Wheatley racing, of course, Jonathan's dad, with a whole bunch of cars, the T70,
the BRM,
and
the March.
P154.
He had the March at one stage.
Ted Williams had the March, didn't he? The BRM P167, didn't he? He had, or 154, 167.
I remember a big spin. I think it was at the Grand Prix historic race years and years ago.
Yeah.
Spinning in the middle of the Woodcote chicane in the BRM.
Yeah, and that wasn't much room to spin a BRM.
Well, exactly.
The Can-Am with 7.6 litres or whatever they had in period, but they haven't scaled back to a 5
Where is that car
historics. Now? I think it went to Germany, didn't it?
Right.
With Joost Kalisch.
Yeah.
Well, to complete the link, actually, Jonathan Wheatley's first job was working for James Cossingham's father, David Cossingham, as an apprentice mechanic in the workshop at DK. So, we can complete that circle fully. David Cuff's responded and done a 2-minute 20, which is probably about what he needs to do.
Yeah, it's really a 2:21 if it can round up. It's 2:20.898. Ollie did 2:17, almost exactly, give or take 4 thousandths.
Yeah, Ollie's the fastest man on the circuit now. He's not quite troubling that fastest lap of 2:16.5 that Griffiths did in the first stint, but bearing in mind we know that there's been a bit of brake fade. I think Ollie's flying. Shedden doesn't need to, and he's got basically a whole lap lead, so he's probably, like the professional he is, doing what he needs to do.
Yeah.
But it looks like Bryant's not leaving anything on the table.
Yeah, it was 20. The gap has gone away for the moment, but the gap was 21 or just under 21 seconds. So it is continuing to come down.
Yeah, I do think they'll be in sight on the last lap. Whether it'll be close enough for a battle, I don't know. But the way Bryant's going, and that's an 18 that lap.
Mike Thorne has just done his personal best lap.
Except it's broken.
So he hasn't just done it. That happened a few laps ago.
Just before he was towed back. And he said it was going really nicely until the electric problem hit.
Sorry,
But we were saying all this this morning in the Automobile Club Woodcote Trophy and Stirling Moss Trophy race, Harvey, that it looked as though Richard Bradley was being reeled in. And we reckoned that on that last lap into Stowe on the last time round, that was going to be the big opportunity for Chris Ward. Of course, it never got quite that far.
Well,
by contrast, in the Jag race, Chris Ward just couldn't reel in Gary Pearson, and you often see that where two guys are tantalisingly in sight, but the gap doesn't get any smaller or any bigger. Sometimes you need a back marker to come and give us a race.
Well, the last time around, Ollie Bryant did a 2:18.4. Dave Cuft 2:20.4. 2 seconds difference. That's not going to be good enough, is it?
No, it's 18 seconds currently with 8 minutes to go. They're lapping in what, 2.25 minutes, something like that. So
2 1/3.
Yeah, we're going to get 4 laps out of this, and so I think David Cuff is pretty safe. It's very steady, safe pair of hands.
Well, 30 laps have been completed by the leader, Gordon Shedden, lapping in the low 2:19s now. What's going on behind the first 3? Well, in 4th place it's Andy Newell in the number 15 car, and behind him in 5th place is the Hartogs car, which Bernardo's driven solo. And then in 6th place we've got the Mark Moods.
Yeah, Cuff's just done his fastest lap of the race, 2:20.2. So
he's got the message.
He's got the message. Even if Bryant can now lap in the low 17s, I think it's probably a little bit too much to ask with 7 minutes left. Gap down to 16 seconds.
What's interesting, the lighting conditions now have made this look even more photogenic.
I know, yeah, it does. Doesn't mean the cars all with their lights on, it looks great. But normally you have a lighter screen and a darker outside, but it's the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely fabulous. So 6 3/4 minutes to go. Leaders are Miles Griffiths, Gordon Shedden at the wheel at the moment of the 37 car, and the only slight possibility of a change, I think, is that one remote possibility now for second place.
Well, 60, as Harvey just said, it's 16.4 seconds now. It has come down.
It has, but the number of so is the time clock. It's rattling away.
Of course, the owner of this car that Gordon Shedden's driving, Philip Walker, also a BRDC board member, and I can imagine that one of the items on the agenda is always between these two, Philip Walker and Gordon Shedden.
If it gets much darker by the end of the race, we might be treated to my personal favourite sight, which is a glowing brake disc.
Oh yes.
Which GT40s are famous for.
It's supposed to be inside them, making them glow, not watching on from the outside, Harvey. As we saw from Estoril. Looked very spectacular with the Cobra.
Right, there's David Cuff through to complete his 31st lap. Nearly 2 minutes he is now behind Gordon Shedden. And in the process doing another improved lap for David Cuff, 2:20.143.
Can he break into the
and
19s?
the gap's down to 14 seconds.
Harvey, you've driven these cars, etc. you were saying, and are the gearboxes any better than they used to be, sort of back in the day? I mean, the sort of remade ZFs are, I hope, a little less clunky than the old ones.
Well, the gear selector is by your, unusually for a GT car, it's by your right-hand side. So all GT40s are right-hand drive. So the gear selector is there on the sill, rather than being in the middle of the car as usual. It's there on your right-hand side, and a system of sort of push rods and couplings create the linkage from there to the gearbox, which is almost behind the rear wheels. So by its very nature, it is fiddly, and any little bit of that gets knocked or gets out of alignment, and that can cost you a gear. It could cost you more than one gear. So it's definitely fair to say that gearbox is still the weak link of a GT40, and there's just not a lot one can do about it.
I would think, having said that, all the sort of the modern CNC machining of bits and pieces for the internals probably make them stronger. But you say if the gear change goes round the houses to get into the box, then it's a bit like a sort of driving a Lotus Europa or something like that, which have notoriously tricky gear changes. It's the one thing you get in and be very, very careful with. So 3 minutes to go in.
Yes, 3 minutes, and waiting to see what the gap's going to be between second and third. 14 seconds it was at the start of the lap they're on at the moment. They'll certainly get one more lap in. Will it be two more? Where's the leader on this lap at the moment? Whereabouts on the lap? We don't get sectors, unfortunately, so I can't work it out from that. We need to have
Stowe.
Well, we've got 2 minutes 45. If you can get across the line in under 2 minutes 20.
Yeah, he's fine. He's fine for that.
So there's two more laps then. And that, of course, is relevant. It's 12.3 second to third now. It's not coming down. It'll be into single figures, the gap second to third, but it won't be less than that. Yeah, so this lap plus one more.
Yeah. And Gordon Shedden still sliding the lead car around beautifully. Little shot there through Abbey up towards Village. .12 seconds now. Could be 8 or 9, and as Harvey predicted, Ollie Bryant will be able to see David Cuff up ahead by the time they get to the, well, certainly the approach to the checkered flag.
And now he's on his last lap. Is he not?
No,
If
he
No,
slows down by 5 or 6 seconds, he could probably
No,
avoid
he's not on his last lap, no.
But still 3/4 of a minute to go as he comes
Yeah.
onto the hangar
So
straight,
he'll
so there
get-
will be one more.
Yeah, one more after this. Getting ahead of myself.
Interesting to see what they have to say afterwards. Still craning
It'll be
my-
about 20 seconds still to run.
Still craning my neck to see those glowing brake discs that we're getting excited about.
— 11 seconds.
Yeah, seven on the line by the pit board, and here they go then. Final lap then of this Amon Cup for GT40 Enduro, mini Enduro here at Silverstone, Motor Racing Legends, Silverstone. Big change in conditions from this morning.
Indeed.
They were really grotty, weren't they?
And the gap's down to 8.4 seconds. Another 5 minutes, he would have done it.
Another 5 minutes, or of course another or 5 seconds fewer, topping up the oil in the in the pit stop. But
Or having to make that second pit stop.
well,
Yeah. But then he, obviously, ifs and buts, Gordon would have gone quicker.
yeah, I think Gordon Shedden's had quite an easy afternoon, having got past Bryant.
Yeah.
He's would have looked in his mirrors to have seen it completely disappeared. Which always, as a driver, makes you think. I always think, gosh, maybe I've done something wrong. Where's everybody gone?
Yes.
I love seeing GT40s with the lights on.
Well, it's classic Le Mans. It looks perfect for what it's in its right environment.
Doesn't look like anybody will challenge Miles Griffith for his fastest lap.
Not now. So there's the leader then on the screen into and through Stowe Corner into Vale. Oh, go on, Harvey, you can take him across the line.
Yeah, there we are, Gordon Shedden coming through the last section here, drifting it for the last corner of the race. He'll see the checkered flag now, and he'll know that that's that. That's 2 out of 2 for that pairing. They won at Donington in the spring, and they've won the second race here at Silverstone in the autumn.
And a slight touch of the hooligans at the end there, wasn't it, as Gordon put on the opposite lock.
And as he did so, of course, up at Abbey, he could see
Yes,
the car that
true.
they've been dicing with for much of the early part of the race. And that was closing indeed on the second place 72 Cook and Cuff car, with David Cuff now driving it.
He may have eased up a little, but on his last lap, Gordon did a 2:18.4, which is a pretty respectable lap time.
Well, yeah, and bearing in mind that our second and third place pairings were in front of Gordon, really they've got another lap to do. So
Yes.
when they crossed there was 5 seconds between them. It's still not close enough, but 5 seconds means that Cuff will have Bryant in his mirrors.
Yes. Yes, last lap's 2:20.3 for David Cuff, 2:17.006 for Ollie Bryan.
I hope that David Cuff's being informed by his pit as to what's happening, because this could be a couple of seconds at the end, couldn't it?
It will be, yeah. Well, I think he must have been informed by his pit, because he's obviously got to move on over the last 15 minutes or so.
And they're both in the flick flack at Abbey now, at Beckett's now. Now it's on to the hangar straight. You can see the second and third placed cars coming down for the final time. There's probably 150 metres, 200 metres between them at the moment. It's closing. And by the time they get to the end, It's going to be just a small matter of metres, but it will be, barring disaster, second place for the Richard Cook and David Cuff combination in 72.
There he is.
There you go. David Cuff brings it over the line, and look at that, probably 50 metres behind, something like that, was Ollie Bryant.
And he does his best. David Cuff did his best lap on the last lap, the best lap for that car.
Dipped into the 219s, yeah.
Yeah.
As always in motorsport, one more lap, and I think we could have had a slightly different result. But
3 seconds, 3.027 seconds is all the gap was.
now I think, by my calculations, David Cuff came third at Donington with myself. So I suspect that means that Shedden and Griffiths will have won this little 2-race championship, and I think that means that David Cuff will have come second.
Well, thanks for that, because we didn't actually realise there was a championship. Nobody told us. But it's a sort of unofficial championship, is it?
Well, I think a series or a championship.
Okay.
I think when you have more than one race, I think there needs to be a champion.
And there's some points being allocated for this.
Well, we know for a fact that if Gordon Shedden and Miles Griffith have won both races, then it
Simple
stands to
on the
reason
basis, yes.
that they've won the overall
Yeah,
honours,
indeed.
if there is such a thing.
Right, so being waved in by a small group of people standing in for thousands at Le Mans.
What does tomorrow hold for you, Harvey?
Yeah, so tomorrow is the Pall Mall Cup. That's another race series that we at DK have helped establish and try to support as best we can. And the Pall Mall Cup is again 2 races. We have one at Donington and the second is here at Silverstone. Tomorrow it's a 3-hour race. And what's important to note about the Pall Mall Cup is we've got 3 or 4 main categories, and the cars, the entrants are encouraged to form teams. So in the case of myself tomorrow, I'm driving a Prix 63 car. James is driving a Cobra with Richard Cook, and Max Gerardo and James are driving a Lister. So between those 3 cars we have a team. Now if everybody goes and forms teams, not only do you have an overall winner and a winner of each class, the winner of the Pall Mall Cup is the winning team. So that's a little angle there that we don't often see in motorsport, but we will see tomorrow in the Pall Mall Cup, the sort of team challenge there.
Well, I hope somebody tells us about the teams and who's in them. Yes, well, good to know that.
It would be a prerequisite, wouldn't it?
It was, sorry?
Would be a prerequisite.
Yeah, well, we hope so. Right, well, we'll have some post-race interviews courtesy of Lewis Beals very shortly. Philip Walker down there as well, as the owner of the winning car.
To present them is David Collingham and DK Engineering. David, an absolutely wonderful race.
Fantastic. It was wonderful to see that group of GT40s going around, going so quickly, so much competition between the guys. What a great group of guys too. They're all good, nearly all good friends. I think they're all good friends, and it was a fantastic race. And with the grid not being as big as we'd liked it to be, it could have been a boring affair, but it certainly wasn't a boring affair from start to finish.
Yeah, just a pity the oil light came on the lad's car.
Well, there you go. We can't really afford the oil.
Yeah. Okay, so here we go. 3, 2, 1. That's what we're looking for. Can we have forward Ollie Bryant and James Cottingham, please? Ollie. Ollie and James. Come along, Ollie. James, come and collect your trophies behind you. And there you go, David Cottingham presenting them to James. And to Ollie, absolutely. We're just going to present the trophies first, then we're going to come back and have a chat. So, just do the photos, and we'll come back for a chat in a bit. Right, there we go. So, second place, if you'd like to step up, is Richard Cook and David Cuff. If you'd just like to come from Richard and David. Excellent second place there from the 72 car. Yep, and David Cottingham there, supporter and sponsor, DK Engineering. And our race winner, I'd like to step forward, Miles Griffiths with an absolutely stunning first stint, and Gordon Shedden, who brought the car home to victory. That's victory for the 37 car for the second time this year in the Amon Cup. And there we go, David, presenting the trophies, and everyone taking their photos. We had a chat with Gordon earlier, so we'll dive in a second and have a quick chat with Miles. Miles, we had a quick chat with Gordon while you were going round, and I have to say, your stint was absolutely awesome, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was quite busy. Had James chasing me all the way, so enjoyed it. It was nice to be pushed, and then Gordon did a great job at the end.
Yeah, I'd say I was very impressed with your stint because you've got some good drivers around you, in those other two, in these, with your co-driver and Ollie and James.
Yeah, definitely, and Gordon put the car on pole for us, so you sort of got a job to do and not let him down.
And so, what were conditions like?
All dry, absolutely fine. There was no issues there. Offline was a bit damp, but fortunately there wasn't too many back markers to pass, and it was all good.
Yeah, many congratulations, because the second time you won the Avon Cup, you won early in the year.
Yeah, definitely. So we won early in the year at Donington. We're keen to come back and repeat it. So yeah, no doubt we'll be having another crack next year. Right?
We look forward to it. Let's see if we can get Gordon or Gordon. Just have a quick word. Congratulations on a victory.
Yeah, all good. These cars are fantastic to drive, and the Grand Prix circuit at Silverstone. It's great that these cars are still here and that the owners want them to be driven and raced. And I mean, they are absolutely iconic, aren't they? From kids with posters on bedroom walls to racing drivers around the world, everyone wants to drive them. So very privileged. Yeah.
And you had to make a pass for the lead.
Yeah, obviously after the pit stops we dropped out in second place, but the pace was really good then. I thought we're going to be on for an absolutely cracking battle with Ollie, but then I think after I got past, I think they had another pit stop which dropped them back a little bit. But it's a lot of fun out there, that's for sure. Got to hang on into the sunset. It's all happening.
Oh, thank you very much. Let's see if we can get Ollie. Oh, no. Throw back. Okay, sorry. Not that, we have to go back to the studio. So, sorry, we can't have a quick chat with Ollie. But anyway, it's back to you in the studio. Ian, Marcus.
Thanks, Lewis. So, for today, that's just about it, I believe I'm right in saying. So, Marcus?
Well, it's been an absolutely cracking day's racing, hasn't it, Ian? We've had 4 really good races. We've been treated with super weather this afternoon, contrary to expectations, and what can we say? But big thank you to our marshals, big thank you to the Motor Racing Legends team, and of course our motor sponsors, DK Engineering and Co, for putting it all on for us.
Absolutely, and it certainly helps to have a wet morning qualifying. It sorts out the grids in a different way, doesn't it, and makes for some interesting racing come the afternoon.
Yeah, so we've got it all up. We'll do exactly the same again tomorrow, I'm sure.
Yes, and just endorse what you say about the thanks to the marshals. It's not the warmest time of year to go racing, and you've got to stand out there dealing with incidents and dealing with them with the usual magnificent efficiency of the Silverstone marshals. So from Marcus Pye, myself, Ian Titchmarsh, it's goodbye for now. Hope to see you all in the morning after you've had an extra hour in bed. Remember, the clocks go back tonight.